when I say like, how to manipulate the data in the class Salesforce, it's like, what is S object? S object is one of the data type, and the manipulation is nothing but the data manipulation language, the DML. So we have gone through. Now we know programmatically, like, we initially we learned how to create the records through admin way, like creating through the forms. But now we know how to create programmatically, like, how to use the insert statement, how to update the existing records, how to delete the records, how to observe the records. And it's not just one individual record. We have seen, like, how to do it in the bulk, how we can do it in the bulk, and how to deal with the arrays, and how to arrays is again another data type, right? Collections, list, we have seen that. So Salesforce is all about, like, objects, records, fields, data types, and the manipulations. Okay, and if you understand these concepts, these core concepts clearly, and you'll be able to achieve, you'll be able to easily connect the dots and do any kind of development. It's all about, like, it's going to be a different object. That's all. When we have account, we are going to deal with the account records. At the same time, when you're going to deal with contacts, we are going to deal with the contact records. But the DML operation is all same. Like, you're either going to insert or update, observe, everything is all the same. And we even discussed about, and then we have gone through some demonstration or the code walkthrough about how to even create the related records. Right? That's what we stop. Okay. And today we are going to start off with something called exceptions. So basically, what is exceptions? Right? Like, let's take an example of, like, what is exceptions? Right. Let me start off with a scenario. Somebody is coming and telling, hey, you want to migrate this 10,000 records or accounts into the Salesforce, and you're writing a piece of code, and then you're migrating the data. 500 records passed, and the next 500 passed, 1,000 records passed, and then 1,010th row, like, that row, the data had some misrepresentation of the data, or like some data missing, whatever, and it failed. Right? You cannot, because you are manipulating the data. When you're playing with the data, when you're migrating the data, when you're updating the data, you need to know, like, what got failed. You need to have a control on the data, like, what got success and what got failed. If tomorrow that particular user is not migrated, and if that comes back and tells, hey, this guy is reporting that he's not able to do it, he's not able to log in, or we don't see him in the system, then it's going to be a problem for you, right? Because, oh man, you migrated, but how come this user is missing? How many users are missing? Why this user was not created? All those questions will come, right? We should be able to in a position to give a report. Dude, I migrated the data. These are the failures. And these are the reason for the failures. You fix the data, then probably we can rerun the data to migrate. In that case, it's absolutely, it has to be error free. Like, we migrate all the data. So, like, if any of the DML operation fails, how do you know the information? Like, this guy failed. That is why you need to have the exceptions. Exceptions are nothing but to get your code or the execution to the flow of failure cases. If everything is success, you'll be fine. If it's getting failed, to capture the data or to capture the history, that's where you are going to deal with the exceptions. All right. What do we do with the exceptions? Like, if DML operation fails, it returns an exceptions. Okay. These exceptions are of type, this is called DML exceptions. Okay. Okay. You're saying that, okay, what will happen when it happens, like, when it gets into the exceptions, what will happen? Which means that you can catch the exceptions. You can catch the exception and move forward. It means that you're catching what got failed, right? That's what it's called, catch the exception. Which record got failed, why it got failed. Once you catch it, okay, you can move on to the next. You have that, you have already caught it, where you can go and analyze later, right? If you don't do this, you will never get to know what failed, what got succeeded, and why it got failed. So the exceptions are more important when you deal with your Apex coding, and especially with the DML, it's really needed. That is what it is called as the DML exceptions. Okay. For example, let's take a simple example of writing a Java code. You are trying to write something into the file, and if the file itself doesn't exist, what will happen? If the file itself doesn't exist, what will happen? So if the file doesn't exist, it's going to tell you an error saying that, oh, okay, the file is not there. I will not be able to write it, right? So how will you know that the file is not there? If you don't know, if you don't know that, if your file is, if you don't know that, if the file doesn't exist, then how will you be able to get this information? So you need to make sure, you need to get this exception, catch the exceptions, and based on that, you can go and fix your problems. And if you don't catch that exception, and if you don't catch that exceptions, you will never be able to find what's going on. Okay, let's take an example here. It's nothing but you can catch the exceptions and perform the error handling. How to handle that error, and then move forward. Okay, or even like, you can even say like how to handle the error conditions. How to handle the error conditions. Okay, let's take an example. Let's go to the browser and go to login.salesforce.com. We know how to do the development here. Click here, go to the developer console. Okay. Then I'm just going to write a piece of code right here. Okay. So did we copy paste all the code that we wrote? Okay. John, insert new account. Okay. Yeah, we did. All right. So what I'm going to do is, it's a simple, guys. Let me see. What is the syntax for the error conditions, or like, exceptions? Exceptions will be a sure interview question, or you will be, when you're getting into the programming world, you'll be always using these exceptions, which is more, that's the right way of coding, and that is how we should code to catch the exceptions. Otherwise, we'll have no control on the code. What is happening, where the flow goes, what fails, what success, we have no control. So you always need to use the exceptions. Okay, syntax for using the exceptions. It has to be, you try something, okay, and if it gets success, well and good, you're fine. And if that's a failure, you catch the failure. That's how you remember the syntax. So all your logic goes here. When some problem with this logic, the code will come to the exception state. You can specify what type of exceptions you are dealing with. In this case, if you're dealing with the DML, so we are working on the DML, data manipulation language. It's called the DML exception. And then you can say like, E, or like, it's an exception message, exception, or you can even say like, EX message, whatever. This is just the class and this is the object. Okay. So this is the syntax. Let's try to do some example by the coding. What I told you, first one is the try and catch. This is the syntax. Only the catch, we are going to do the DML exception. E message or whatever, doesn't matter, whatever you declare. And then what are we going to do? If something happens, let's print it in the console, system.debug, to see what is that exception, right? What we need to do is we got an exception. Then what we do, let's get, this is the object, right? Always whenever you want to access the method, you have to call like object.method. We already know that. So this one has like get message. Okay, that's it. So now let's write the logic. What is the logic we are going to write? Let's take a simple scenario. We have been dealing with the insert and everything, right? Let's go and take a look at the account object as an example. Account, right? Okay. Okay. In order to create an account, we need the account name and all that. Okay. What we will do, we will simply write simple example. Account ACCT equal to new account. And this is where you specify what is the name of the account, phone number, fax, and all those things. But I'm not putting anything here. Okay. And then I'm saying like simply insert this account. I'm trying to insert this account. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to insert an account. That's all. I'm not doing anything else. Execute. Variable does not exist e-message. Okay. Okay. Oh, this is top. Exception. I had a typo there. Okay. It got executed. Okay. It got executed. Let's go and see if there is any account got created. See, there is no account got created at all accounts. And then you can even sort it and see if there are any accounts that got created based on the name. Okay, so we are not able to. Let's see recently viewed accounts or recently anything like recently viewed or recent updated, anything like that. So we are not able to see any account that got created. Now let's step back and see what happened to the debug. We put the statement, right? You see here, it came here. This is my test class. Okay. Okay. So what happens is, it comes here. We got an exception. Insert failed. See, we are trying to insert, and we got an exception is our statement. So if you see here, this is our statement. We got an exception, right? After that, it's all about whatever the system gives. What does the system give? Insert failed. Because required fields missing. Required fields are missing. At least you have to provide the name. The required name is the required field for the account object to create. You are not providing anything. At least a name you should provide, should create an account. So now you understand the concept of, like, when it is trying to execute this code, if you don't do this, you will never know out of 10,000 records which one had a problem. So whenever it had a problem, it will come here. So you know that, okay, now you can here even print, like, what is it trying to do. Now you know that, oh, okay, this one got failed because we had a required field is missing. So we will tell them that, guys, go and fix the data. If you don't even have the account name, how can we create the account? So we can even count how many failed, right? Like if there are like too many things that's coming inside the loop, then we will know that, oh, okay, there are like 10 things came, so 10 records failed out of 10,000. What are those 10 records? We can take a look and then see. It's not like just insert. It could be update or delete or anything that goes out of normal execution. Anything that goes out of normal execution, it gets into the exception. So it's like exception handling is always needed to catch the problems. That is why they are even saying, like, try catch, or trying to do something. If there is it's not that every time it's success, right? We do some things, but it might succeed or it might fail, right? Even in our regular day-to-day life, we do something. It might success or failure. When failures, what happens? How can we deal with that? Think of a real scenario when some job is running. We are doing it in the real-time projects. Some job is running. Every day the job will be running, and then when the job fails, think about it, inserting the logic here to send email to the administrator or project manager or project team. How cool is that? If the job fails, then it will come here to the exception, and then it will send email to the team. This job did not run, please take a look. Then somebody can jump in and then debug it to see why the job did not run. So everything can be in control. Do you understand the real-time example that I'm explaining? Any questions with the DML exceptions? How is it handled? What is the purpose of it? And we wrote a piece of code to reproduce the exception, because on purpose we didn't give the name, the required field, but it clearly tells required field is missing. The name is the required field, which I did not find it, so I cannot create it, so I'm getting into the exception. If you don't do this, let's take an example. You are not writing this type of code. This is the good practice of doing things. This is the way programming should work, and this is way the programmer should do the coding. Let's say an example of this one. You're just doing this, right? And then if you do this, you see here, the error will appear, but you cannot, but this is just the testing window you're having it. Okay. Like, for example, if you're going to have your class, okay, you're going to have this logic written here. If you're writing this logic here, and then here you're going to call the method. So let me save this first. Okay. I'm going to create a class or object from this class. This is a class, and then DML obj object equal to new DML class. I'm going to rename this as create account, right, to just make a context. So this is the DML object dot, this is the create account. Okay, cool. And let me save this file. If you have a problems, you can click on the problems and see if there are any problems here. Okay, there are no problems, it got saved. If you see here, all the Apex classes that you write will be saved with the extension of APXC. C is nothing but class. It's called Apex class. Okay. All right. So Now let's try to execute it. We are executing it. Okay. You see here, this is the problem that occurs here, right? And then you say like, okay, but there will be nowhere you are logging it somewhere. But when we use the try catch, you can write it somewhere, right? You're writing it in the system debug. Okay. So I'm trying to execute the code from here, but it's just throwing the message here. Okay, that line 5 column 1, hey, this at least the record field must be there, but you're just keep passing it. But how do you know after the execution is completed that which record has the problem? You have to write it somewhere to go back and take a look what are the things that got failed. Okay, so that is why we are doing it in the try catch. In the catch, you can write it in the file or you can write it in the log. So we wrote it in the log, like debug, what is that message? It gets delivered. So this is the code that we wrote, right? You see here, it comes to the catch, and then this is the code that we wrote. Oh, we got an exception, and then we are getting the message, and then we are capturing it somewhere. So this message is with us now. We did not skip it. We did not miss it. We caught it. That's the catch. You can go and refer this and then fix it. Any questions on the DML? DML operations, DML exceptions. Why do we do the DML? Class, object creations, data types, variable declarations. So far, we have learned a lot in terms of Apex programming. Any questions?
No.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now, let's step back and then we are going to learn another concept called triggers. Triggers. Okay. Let's learn about what is trigger. What is trigger? In the regular world, remember we used to tell, hey, he's triggering me, or this guy is triggering me. Hey, pull the trigger out of the gun. We do all this. We say all this. What is it? It is just to poke or something else to happen, right? I'm acting like this because this guy triggered me, right? And then the bullet goes out of the gun when you pull out the trigger, right? You're just doing something, and the result of which it's triggering something else or the some other actions to happen. That is what in regular world we call it as trigger, right? So what is trigger in Salesforce? The triggers are nothing but the triggers are also an Apex class. Now if you see here, now we learned, now file new, we learned what is Apex class. Now we are moving to the Apex trigger. We learned extensively what is Apex class, object, data type, DML operations, and everything. Next one is the trigger. Okay, so we'll be going through these individual items in this development course. So that's what the whole idea is. You can always go and open the classes that you create, no problem. Okay. The next one is the trigger. This is what we are seeing. You can create a new trigger from here. Okay. All right. So trigger also an Apex class. Basically, trigger enables to perform some custom action on some events. Okay. Basically, what is trigger? Trigger is going to perform some action based on the event. right? This event happened, and then this event happened, and some actions. The outcome of that event is the action. Okay, you are yelling or you are shouting at somebody because something happened to you. Some event had happened to you, and then you are performing that action. When you pull the trigger, bullet comes out. That you pull the trigger is called nothing but you performed some event, and the outcome action is the bullet comes out of the gun. Okay, so now you know what is trigger. It's like to perform some actions based on the event. Now, what is event? Event is nothing but the DML things. What are the things we can do? Either you can create, or you can update, or you can delete. These are the only things that we can do, right? These are the only things we saw. Create, update, or delete. If it is brand new, you create. If you're going to update the existing things, you update, or you delete the existing things. These are the only things that can happen. So when you do some of these events, there should be some action happening. That is what the trigger is all about. Let's take a real-time scenario. Let me tell you a simple scenario. You have a form where you fill in all your employee details, and your manager gave you a salary hike, and your salary increased from $80,000 to $100,000, right? Based on that $100,000, you will have to contribute the tax. You'll have to contribute the federal tax, state tax, and your withholdings, and you have 401k, whatever, withholdings of everything, right? That needs to be updated, right? Or even you say as simple as that. When you create an account, when the account is created with annual revenue of $100,000 or more, your CEO has to be notified through email. You are performing some event. You will create an event, right? Create is an event for account object. If you have account revenue greater than 1 million, CEO has to be notified. So if you always have the trigger that you created, it is going to act upon your event. The event is going to be you are going to keep creating the accounts. Whenever the account is created, you can send email to your CEO or notifications to anybody, or you can even do all sort of things you can even validate. Whenever the account is created, I must make sure that annual revenue data is filled in. Okay, remember, you can make it mandatory through admin. You can go to the field and then you can mark the field as mandatory. That's the admin way of doing things. If you wear your hat as the developer, you have a control of everything. You don't even need to really care what admin does, as long as the field annual revenue is there. When I save it, I trigger an action. That action is going to check if the annual revenue is filled. If not, I'm not going to save it, right? So you can do some actions when the event happens. The event is nothing but the DML operations. And you can do this. You can make a trigger to happen when the event happens. One more thing is, You can even make this event action to happen when you trigger the event before or after. Let's take a simple example that I'm telling you. There is a requirement. Guys, developers, develop a code, create it so that CEO tells, hey, when there is an account created more than $1 million, I should be notified. Can you work on this requirement? That will be like after trigger, right? After creating the account, you check if it is more than 1 million and then send email to CEO. You don't send email before even creating the account. If the account itself is not created, then what is the point of him receiving the email? If he goes back, he will not even see that account. He'll come and yell at us, dude, I don't even see the account, then why am I getting the email? Right? We should notify the CEO only after we create the record, which is the account object. Let's step back and look for the scenario that I said before. Somebody is filling without the annual revenue itself. You want to make sure that annual revenue is filled before submitting the data. You are saving the data, and after that, if you're telling them, hey, put the annual revenue, it doesn't make any sense. You have to do it before saving the data. Before even saving the account, you need to tell the user, dude, fill in the annual revenue. This annual revenue is empty, so I cannot save the data. That is the before trigger. We're able to understand the concept of the trigger as well as events, actions, and there are like two type of triggers, before trigger and after trigger. Any questions?
No.
Are you guys with me? Is everything is clear?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So with this said, okay, now let's talk about, we understand the concept. Now let's talk about the syntax for triggers. What is the syntax is going to be for the triggers? It's going to be like trigger name on object name. Trigger happens only on object. Okay. You can have a trigger written for account. You can have a trigger written for contact. You can have a trigger written for opportunity. You can have a trigger written for lead, cases, campaigns. Everything in Salesforce is all the object, right? Whenever the account is created, this trigger will happen. Whenever contact is created, this trigger will be executed. So the trigger will always act upon object. The syntax is trigger name on object name, and then bracket trigger events.
Karthik, sorry to interrupt you. Can I leave the meeting because I just got work and I have to go. You will share the video with me, so I will watch the video later.
No problem. It's just I'm going to be here for like 5 minutes, and then I can go even the sample code tomorrow. No problem. And today I'm going to stop it. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karthik. Sorry for that.
No problem. So the trigger is going to be the trigger name on object. It always acts upon the object, and we are going to specify the events. The event is going to be like, is it like a after or before? This is called the event. Okay. So after creating the object or before creating the object, this is what you are going to tell, and it acts upon the object. And you can write your logic here, what is going to happen. This is the logic for the code block. Code block for the trigger. The trigger gets executed based on the before or after event on the object. Whenever this object is created, this trigger will get executed based on what event you put. If it is before, even creating before, it will get executed. This code block will execute it. Or if you put after, this code block gets executed after creating the object. Is it all clear?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we'll meet tomorrow, and then we'll finish up this trigger class. Okay, whatever the sample code, but I don't want to put too much in one day. Tomorrow we'll finish up the triggers with the after and before, and also we'll write a sample code. We'll execute it. We'll see how it acts upon the object, and what are the things that we can do it with the trigger, and then what are the real-time cases the trigger can be used. The triggers are very, very, really useful, and most of the companies are extensively using the triggers. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I have a question, Carl. Like,
Sure, go ahead.
and this exception handling,
Uh-huh.
how can we know that we are using exception by seeing this catch?
How can we know that we are using the catch? I didn't.
No. Like in this in a particular program, how can we notice that we are using a exception handling? I'm asking. Like we are using a catch over here, right? Like
Right.
if we use the catch, it is like we are using exception handling.
Yes, because this is
Okay.
a statement. All your logic. So previously we used to write just the logic.
Yeah.
All the logic has to be written with try catch block.
Okay.
So this is what it tells that you are using the exceptions. This is
Okay.
the syntax. Try and the catch is the syntax.
Okay.
You can even do that without this try catch. That's a bad way of coding because you will not be able to catch anything if something happens to your code.
Okay. Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions?
That's it. No.
Okay. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow. Yeah, thanks. Bye.